A very important topic in Pillars under your calling is that of taking creative initiative in your ministry. As a young leader, it can be very frustrating at times because you feel like you're not getting the opportunities to lead and to build in the way you want to. And sometimes we have this mindset of when I get the position or when I get the title, then I'll actually be able to do something far more significant. Let me read to you a verse from Proverbs chapter 6. Here's what it says in verse 6. Consider the ways of the ant and be wise. Without having any boss, ruler, or authority, they take initiative all summer to gather food for the winter. When we read this verse, oftentimes we focus on the initiative that an ant takes. But Solomon's very clear in this verse saying, think about it. The ant has no boss, no ruler. There is an initiative that the ant brings that we can learn from without having to have direction or opportunity given by the boss. Now, we all have bosses. We all have people of authority that we respect and honor. And yet there is an opportunity for you right now as a young leader, not in the future, but right now, to take a creative initiative that will allow you to be used by the Lord in a significant way. And this initiative is illustrated for us in 1 Samuel chapter 14 and the story of Jonathan. Because in 1 Samuel chapter 14, the nation of Israel is facing an opposing evil army that is so much greater than they are, and Israel's king Saul is terrified. He's hiding in a cave and the soldiers are doing nothing. And it is Jonathan who stands up, who is not the king, who does not have this position of authority, and yet he stands up and he takes creative initiative in seeing God's will come to pass. And his story is there as a model for us. And I encourage you, take time to read 1 Samuel chapter 14, because you'll discover some characteristics that are in Jonathan that you need to have if you're going to be a young leader who takes this kind of creative initiative. Jonathan begins by being a person of character. If you study that story, what you discover is Jonathan does not resent the fact that he's not king. He does not resent the fact against his father. He does not complain to his father. He does not just wait passively, full of frustration that his father has not appointed him for this role. Jonathan does not try to get the 600 soldiers to revolt against the father and follow him. Jonathan has good character. What he does is appropriate. It has integrity. Creative initiative doesn't necessarily mean everything we do has to be given to us as a directive. Consider the ant. No boss, no ruler. But it does mean that when we stand up to do something and take initiative, we do it with character. We do it in a way that maintains an honor and an integrity and become the person that God wants us to be, so that we don't create any disillusionment or disunity in the ministry in which we are serving. It's really important that we understand this as young leaders, that we are not simply waiting for a human opportunity that's given to us, and we do not create that opportunity in a way that does not have integrity. But we see ourselves like Jonathan did, as a vessel. And we realize that there is an opportunity that is for us, but it begins by having this integrity, character, and doing what is put before you. Jonathan stands up and he's going to try to make a difference in a very difficult situation. He's going to take some initiative. Upon the character then, Jonathan has faith. When you read 1 Samuel 14, Jonathan makes a very interesting statement. He says this, perhaps the Lord will work through us. And then he adds to it, nothing can stop God. And in this one statement, he kind of gives for us a picture of what faith is as a young leader when you are taking initiative. Perhaps the Lord will work for us. There is a bit of uncertainty. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to try something. I'm going to do something for God. I'm not sure how it will turn out. And yet with that, nothing can stop God is a bit of certainty. And if you're going to take initiative, you've got to be willing to accept the fact that you will have certainty and you will have uncertainty. If you wait to only have certainty, you will rarely take initiative. You will always wait for all of the situation to be perfect, all the resource to be there, all the people to be there, all the permissions to be there, and you will wait. But if you're willing to understand that Jonathan said, I'm not 100% sure what will happen, but I'm willing to step out in faith. I think faith sometimes is stepping out in obedience when we're not sure what's going to happen. And that's where we need to trust God. And Jonathan in this statement is saying, I'm going to trust God's character. I don't know what the actions of God will look like, but I know I can trust his character. As a young leader, when you take creative initiative, you do it with your character, and then you step out in faith, realizing there will be certainty in who God is. There will be uncertainty. And that's okay, because ultimately we are trusting God with this process of creative initiative. There's another dimension to Jonathan, though. He stands up with character, he has this faith, but he doesn't take the initiative alone. Jonathan has influence. He goes to his armor bearer, and he encourages his armor bearer and invites the armor bearer to join him. And the armor bearer makes this statement. He says, I am with you, heart and soul. The armor bearer doesn't join Jonathan because Jonathan has such a great plan. Actually, Jonathan's plan is a little strange. The armor bearer doesn't join Jonathan because Jonathan has all the resources. Jonathan has one weapon. The armor bearer joins Jonathan because of who Jonathan is and the character and the integrity and the Spirit of God that Jonathan carries. What's important to note in this, as a young leader taking initiative, Jonathan does not go to the king to try to influence the king. He goes to his armor bearer to influence his armor bearer. Oftentimes as young leaders, we have the wrong mindset. The mindset is, listen, if I could influence those in authority over me, then I will have a great opportunity to make a difference. Jonathan, he influences those that are closest to him, his armor bearer, so that he can have an influence there and together they can do something. God has surrounded you with people, good people. You may look at them and say, they don't have much influence. They don't have any authority. They're barely where I'm at. And yet realize that taking creative initiative is not something we do alone. It's something we do in inviting others. Jesus didn't go to the authorities and the religious leaders to influence them for his mission. He selected fishermen and tax collectors and common people. They were like his armor bearers because he knew that in fulfilling a mission and with that initiative, there was an influence that comes. Here's Jonathan as a model for us. Have character when you stand up to do something. Have a faith, trusting God's nature, knowing there is some uncertainty, but also have an influence with others so that together you're going to make this significant difference. Now Jonathan gets to a place in the story where he has to take some action. He has to actually set out to embrace the battle. And when you read 1 Samuel 14, you realize that the way that Jonathan goes about the battle is a little unusual and in the natural doesn't seem to be that intelligent. He has the lower ground, not the high ground, which is a bad military strategy. He's out in the open against a much larger army, which is a bad military strategy. But what Jonathan does, which is a model for us, is he takes one step. He takes this first step, which seems like a small step. Jonathan and his armor bearer step out to do something together, one small step together. It is when they take that one small step that then God takes the one God step. This is a really important trait from this story that we need to learn as young leaders taking initiative. At some point, it's not a matter of you being positioned by those in authority over you that you can do what you want. It's not a matter of looking for the great step that you can take. And it's not a matter of passively waiting for God to do something great. It's a matter of discerning, what is the one step I can take? And if I take this step, my small act will lead to God's great act. There's a wonderful story in the New Testament about four friends we would all want to have, because they have a friend who is paralyzed, and there is a house and it's so crowded and Jesus is in the house. And they bring their friend to the house, but they can't get in, so they literally vandalize the house. They break a hole in the roof of this house. They vandalize it because they want to get their friend to Jesus. These four friends, they take one small step. All they do is bring their friend to Jesus. But that one small step then leads into a God step, and Jesus heals their friend. In taking creative initiative, yes, we must start with character and integrity so that we do this the right way and we do not create confusion or disunity. We must understand that there will be faith involved and that God has given us an influence, perhaps not with people in authority, but those around us that can join us. And then we know we have this action to take, and we have to step out in a way that may seem small. But there's a specific reason why God's pattern is take a small step and then let me come in. He wants us to be people of faith, but he also wants to receive the glory, which is part of the Jonathan story. Jonathan, and the way he handles this, is he kind of shows himself to the army. He exposes himself because he knows God's going to get the glory, not just through the event, God's going to get the glory through me. Please understand this. God receiving the glory is not just in the practice or the activity or the fruitfulness of the ministry. God receives more glory simply through you. You are God's glory. When you stand up with character and integrity and influence and faith and action, and God works through you, God receives glory through who you are, your identity and your faithfulness to him. When you have this conviction, I could do something for God. I don't need a ruler or a boss to tell me everything or to always give me permission, but I could stand up and take creative initiative and see God work in an amazing way. You know, this idea of your calling involving creative initiative, it has application in at least 3 spheres of your life and ministry. First, of course, it has application in your ministry. You can look at your ministry and the season you're in. You can look at those in authority over you. You can look at your vision and your purpose and say, where could I take creative initiative like Jonathan did? Where could I stand up and make a difference for God? Like the ant, not needing a ruler or a boss. It also has application in your family, where God does not call us to be passive as husbands and wives and as parents. Where could I take initiative with my children? Where could I take initiative with my spouse or with my extended family? And in taking that kind of initiative, with faith, with integrity, with influence, I could see God work in my family. The third area where it has application is in your community, in your neighborhood, with the surrounding people. Where could I take initiative? How could I serve my community? How could I make a difference? Nobody's expecting me to do this. Nobody is directing me to do this, but I could make a difference in my community with character and influence and faith and action. And when you do that in your family, in your ministry, when you do that in your community, because of how you are doing it, just like Jonathan, God receives the glory. And he receives the glory through you. It's interesting how this story in 1 Samuel 14 ends. Let me read it to you in verse 23. It says this, "So on that day, the Lord saved Israel, and the battle moved on beyond Beth-aven." It's an amazing story about Jonathan taking initiative and being victorious in the battle. But the story ends saying, there's another battle coming. You see, this idea of having a calling where you take creative initiative in the moment you're in. You do not sit passively going, when somebody gives me the title, when somebody gives me the money, when somebody gives me the opportunity. No, you go, right now, I can be like Jonathan. It's a lifestyle. It's a choice you make in your calling, not just for a moment. It's a position you take in your calling as to who you will be. Paul wrote about this in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15. He says it this way: "Be very careful then how you will live, not as wise, but as unwise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil." Paul says to the church, listen, be aware of this. Be aware of the opportunities that God has given you to stand up like a Jonathan and to make the difference because you took the initiative. 2,000 years ago, a handful of disciples saw Jesus, their Lord, ascend to heaven. And they were stuck with a choice. Will we wait passively for somebody to come and give us all the directions? Or like Jonathan, will we stand up and take initiative? I want to encourage you, as a young leader, God has a call on your life, a purpose for you, and it doesn't begin next year or in 5 years from now. It begins today. See the problem God has positioned you to solve. See the opportunity in that moment that God has positioned you to take initiative with. Do it with integrity, of course. Do it with influence. You're going to have to do it with faith, and you're going to have to act out. But ultimately, when you do this, God will receive the glory. Do not fall to the temptation that you have to wait until somebody else gives you permission, until somebody else gives you the position, until somebody else gives you the resource. Right now, you can begin to fulfill your calling by taking the creative initiative to see God's mission and purpose fulfilled, just like Jonathan did.